What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Charles, owner of mXrevival and mXrevival.com, and today we're finally doing what is probably the most requested mod for the RMZ450 Mortal Man's build series. I went ahead and ripped out my stock 450 BFRC shock by Showa. This is the shock the bike comes with stock, and we went ahead and dropped in a 2019 and up RMZ250 rear shock. This is made by KYB. The shock has been fully reworked and revalved by Pro Circuit to match the original forks, which were also done by PC. They are the original Showa units. And today we're going to find out what the squawk's all about with this RMZ250 shock mod. Now, if you'd like to try this mod yourself, you can get any 2019 or newer RMZ250 rear shock and drop it directly into your 2018 or newer RMZ450. No problem. So first off, let's go ahead and jump into the install, and then we're going to head out to the track and test this sucker out. Also, be sure to stay tuned to the end. I'm going to share with you guys what my final clicker settings were. So RMZ crew, let's go ahead and get to work. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get this job started. We're going to be removing the BFRC shock out of my RMZ450. We're going to need to go ahead and remove the exhaust, seat, subframe, and then we'll gain access to the shock. And then, as you already know, we're going to be putting in this 2019 or newer RMZ250 shock into my 450. As you can see, it's got some different adjustments, looks a little bit different color, and I am really excited to give this a try. So before we install this shock, we'll remove the BFRC, bring it up on the bench, and we'll talk about why you might want to do this, why I'm going to do this, and it may be something that you're interested in. So let's go ahead and rip that thing out of the old 450. If you've never done this job before, it's really easy, so go ahead and stay tuned and we'll go ahead and do this together. You'll see what tools you need. Very, very basic. If you're not interested, because you already know how to do this, I'm going to go ahead and, of course, as always, leave some chapters in the video description below for you. That way you can skip ahead, do what you need to do. We will be riding this in this video. And real quick, guys, normally I would take the bike to the track with this shock installed. I would go ride it, and then I would take it apart at the track, install whatever part it was, just like I did the pipe, just like I did the other suspension sets in the past if you've been following this RMZ series. But the dirt out there is really, really silty. I don't really feel like taking the bike apart out there, risking getting any dirt or dust into the bike. Back at Club Moto, the dirt was really tacky and sticky like clay, so it wasn't really as big of a deal. I could control that a lot better. And so Skyline has a lot of wind and fine dust. I'm not really interested. On top of that, I've been riding this shock for a collective probably 100 hours, so I have a really good read on it. I could tell you how it feels in certain situations, when I make mistakes, how it reacts, how it doesn't react. And so I think my explanation of this shock without putting them back to back on the same day will still be really great. I'm very in tune with this shock, so I don't foresee that being a problem. I think I'll be able to give you some great feedback no matter what. So let's go ahead and get this sucker up in the air. Guys, these lift stands are finally back in stock after months and months. You can check them out on mxrevival.com. But as you can see, I'm not hunched over, crushing my back. That's something I do at the track instead. It just makes life so much easier to work on things. This bike is all the way up now, and I'm 6'1". The top of the seat is basically to my chin, so pretty remarkable. Anyways, let's get going. You just need to get started. A few simple things. 8mm up here, some 10mm to get the pipe off. The 8mm is for the seat. Most shocks on most bikes are going to be a 17mm wrench or socket, sometimes a 19. And then we'll need to go ahead and remove the clamp that holds the air boot onto the fuel injection system, the butterfly itself. We'll have some 12mm stuff to get the subframe, and then this whole thing will just pop right off. So we'll start with the number plate, get this pipe out of the way. Seat will be coming off with the number plate. A lot of times, guys, on two strokes, you can go ahead and just pull the whole subframe off and leave the pipe on, but it's so much more cumbersome with four strokes because their pipes are huge. It's harder to weasel everything back together when you're done, so it's just easier to get the canister off the subframe first on four strokes, in my opinion. Not to mention, it only takes a second. And that is that. As you're taking stuff apart, it's always a good idea to put the bolts back in the threaded holes they came from. That way you don't lose them. I'm gonna go ahead and move up to the air boot where the band clamp is holding it to the butterfly. It's a 3mm. It's gonna be impossible for you guys to see, but it's just like the two strokes that you use. Number 2 Phillips. Go ahead and get your Allen wrench in here. Spin the sucker off and the band clamp will be loose and ready to go. Now on the RMZ, these radiator shrouds are actually covering up the 2 subframe bolts that we need to remove. So pull this off real quick. You can probably even just get away with flaring it out most of the time. Just pulling it out to the side like that. We can get access to the subframe right here. On the RMZ450, there's also a little clamp right here, factory clamp that holds a wire going to a sensor in the airbox. It's reusable. You can just lift the tang and take it apart. Remember to put that back when you put the bike back together. And then we can start tackling the subframe. These are 12mm lowers. Same with the uppers. The shorter ones are the lower end of the subframe, longer upper end of the subframe. Same thing other side. Lower, upper, and this thing is ready to come off. The only fight you're gonna have or resistance is a little bit of the air boot around that butterfly. So you can kind of manipulate, press the boot, and just kind of weasel everything off. Oh, I'm forgetting the band clamp up here. And now that you have access here, you can decouple the sensor. There's a little connector down in here. Grab it, pull it off, and she's free. And just set this entire thing aside. I always like to do a little test when I'm this far into the bike and see how good a job I've been doing of cleaning my air filters. I'm pretty religious with it. Change them almost every single ride unless it was a short ride. Not much in there. A little bit of residual oil, not bad. Go ahead and stick a rag in here so you do not knock any dirt or debris inside this while you're working. And also, don't forget to take it back out when you're done. So as you guys can see, it only takes about a minute, 2 minutes to get to the shock. It's very easy, very common on all bikes. Great time to get a little bit of brake cleaner and just clean up some of this gunk. There's grease that comes out of the upper shock bearing and it attracts dirt, obviously. So it's just a good time to give a little wipe down. And this is another reason why you stuff a rag into the butterfly or intake, because you might be knocking some of this crap down into that otherwise. And if you do, it's not the end of the world. You can always blow it out with an air compressor or maybe something soft. Always a good idea to check it out no matter what. And so more easy stuff. The shock pretty much comes right out. You got a 17 up top, you got a 17 below. So I think you know what to do with those. Nut off up top. Don't have to get on the ground on my knees. This is very nice. Need a 17mm wrench for that because the shock is behind the linkage somewhat. So we got a nut off up top. We got a nut off down below. Man, we sure are getting a lot of nuts off. All right, so we can go ahead and pull out the bolt up top, the upper shock bolt. And sometimes it's easy to do that by lifting and modulating the rear wheel a little bit. Just take some tension off the bolt. You can push it out with your finger. Everything's nice and greasy still. As you can see, she is cared for. Go ahead and push this lower one out. When you get the top one out, the wheel will fall down and that will bring the bolt that we're accessing here below the link arm. Make it easy to get out. Looking good, still greasy. That's it, guys. Shock is free. So let's get this over to the bench and talk about a few things. So first things first, if I know I'm going to be stashing a shock aside for any length of time, always like to throw a zip tie through the upper shock bearing here. Reason being, there are some collars. They're very loose, they fall out easy, and next time you go to use your shock, most of the time, that has fallen out, God knows where time has passed, then you need to wait 3-4 days to order a new OEM one. Pain in the ass. So first thing, zip tie, good to go. Now let's talk about these two shocks and why and how they are different from one another and why I want to give this a try. So first up, we have the BFRC. This is made by Showa. It stands for Balance Free Rear Cushion. This is the 450 shock 2018 to 2023. Then you have a more standard shock. I don't know any acronyms for this bad boy. I just know it's made by KYB, and in 2019, the RMZ250 came with KYB front and KYB rear, unlike the 450, which came with Showa and still comes with Showa. Brands have always done this, especially Suzuki. Back in the day, the RM125 had twin chamber Showas. Then the 250 two-strokes had open bath KYBs. A lot of guys would swap the twin chamber stuff from the 125 onto the 250. And so this is really nothing new. And I think a lot of people are grateful that this came out on the 250s and then it actually just drops right into the 450s. And so now we'll talk about why. So the BFRC, man, this poor thing gets a lot of heat from the magazines, and maybe rightfully so. It is the only bike that runs this shock. They say it comes from street bike technology where shaft speeds are moving slower than in motocross or off-road. And I think once a magazine gives something a bad rap, it pretty much sends everyone out to their favorite suspension tuner, or in the case of Suzuki, they've been getting bashed for so long that, you know, when they read about the shock or you read about the shock, it might even make guys just completely not want one of these bikes. which is a bummer because it's a really great bike. I love it. It's my second one. Anyways, watch the RMZ Mortal Man's build series on this channel if you'd like to know more about that. I pair my 18, which was modified to my stock 20, pipes, suspensions, you name it. I had other people ride them. Anyways, and so I will say that in the beginning, when this was not done by Pro Circuit, both of these have been redone by Pro Circuit, which is absolutely freaking amazing, I have to say. It was a little bit unpredictable. It didn't do anything wrong, but it always had this sensation like if you made a mistake or if you overjumped something or something just wasn't quite right, it had a sensation, not an actual cause, but it had a sensation like it was gonna do something wacky and maybe spit you out, although that never occurred. And so things I liked about it up front when it was stock, it felt like it was always out, following the ground really well. I liked that a lot. But like I said, there was just a little bit of an unnerving sensation. I had this thing at Club Moto, Northern California. I had it out at LACR in Southern California, which is a totally different open style track. I never had any problems with it, but it kind of made your ass pucker a little bit. Not because it actually did anything wrong, but it just had this slight unnerving sensation about it. However, Pro Circuit took this in. This shock, now, if you have one of these, is amazing. I absolutely love it. It is ultra predictable. It never steps out of line. It never rebounds and kicks me off the track. If I make a mistake, let's say I try to do a butt whip and I don't quite come all the way back by the time I hit a jump landing, or I underjump it because of a butt whip. When I land, if I'm a little bit sideways, it soaks it up and then it rebounds nice and slow. It's just so concrete. So this shock, I have nothing bad to say about it at all. And that is since it's been reworked by Pro Circuit. We did an extended bladder here. We did a lowering link in the back, which they valve to work in conjunction with the lowering link. So if you guys have one of these bikes and you haven't done this yet, strongly recommend this setup. And so having said all that, why the hell are we swapping then? Well, honestly, I just feel like it. I'm actually a little, not nervous, but let's say apprehensive, because I'm so used to this and it works so well and there's nothing wrong with it, that going to something else is going to start the process all over again, where you have to sort of behave, don't ride like you normally do. If I have to go slower, I need to check my ego. Not that I'm fast in the first place, but I think you understand, you want to go out and ride like you always ride, and we'll be feeling this out for the first time. And so that technically could be unsafe. We need to set the sag, get the bike balanced, go through all these clickers. But I think once that's all done, and we may not conclude that, we will not conclude that in the first video, but you guys are welcome to post comments below and ask for updates. It's gonna be a work in progress. I'm not gonna figure it out in one day, even if it feels really great. And so to further why go ahead and swap these out, this is technically why. So the BFRC has two circuits. It has basic compression and basic rebound. Now, adjusting these will control how fast and how slow the shock action moves. So it's a little different than most shocks. It's almost kind of like an older shock before they had all these other adjustments. We'll get into what this has in a second and why I think this will be a good swap. And so for example, like my 97 RM250 shock, it has compression and rebound, and that's it. It doesn't have high-speed compression. And so what I think I'll gain from this swap is that I'll have extra circuits when we put this shock in, and that allows you to tune for more specific happenings on the track. So for example, this has compression and rebound. This has compression, rebound, which would be called low speed compression rebound, then high speed compression and high speed rebound. But a quick example here would be on the high speed compression for this guy, that's something you would tune in a G out situation. If you hit a big G out, or if you're going off a jump face, that's something I don't have the tunability for here. So maybe I can tune their low speed compression for chops and what have you. And then if the shock is bottoming out when I seat bounce something, that's a different situation aside from the chops. I'd be able to turn in the high speed compression and get it to stop bottoming out if I'm doing a seat bounce, for example. And so you can see there's two compression circuits that kind of work in two different areas on the track, or two different scenarios. And why that might be a shortcoming on this shock is if I'm gonna do the same seat bounce and the compression is too soft, well, I might have this compression tuned really well for chop and basic bumps. But then if I go to turn it in, because it lacks a high-speed compression and I'm trying to stop the bottom out on a G out, well, maybe now it's going to be too stiff on the chops where I really like it. And so there's a fine balance point, I guess you could say, where you might be taking from one situation to give to another. And that's why all these extra circuits are really awesome. So that's what I'm looking forward to about this. And so one more interesting thing to point out about the two of these is that Inside, the valving, the shim stack, which I am not a suspension tuner, so all this will be in layman's terms. If you guys are in-depth suspension tuners or have more experience than I do, which wouldn't be too hard to acquire at this point, you can go ahead and leave a helpful comment below. If it's good, I'll pin it. I like when you guys have a value add for the channel. But the valving and the shim stacks in here, which is what the shock is forcing through oil to control how fast or how slow, based off your clicker settings, the shock shaft position is. That whole shim stack is on the end of this shaft. It's all right on the end here. And so that's a really traditional setup. The shims will be pushed through the oil back and forth, both compression and rebound. On this guy here, it's different. All the valving is up here, and this is just a plunger inside. So this is forcing oil up through the shim stacks in this area. So it's a totally different design. The idea, as far as I know, was to reduce cavitation, which is like foaming, frothing, air. So that is one interesting fact about the construction differences between these two. And so when something's new and dirt bikers don't have it figured out, and then the magazine gives it a bad review, right away everybody just wants to get rid of it. But I will say, this thing has been amazing since it's been worked on by PC. So having said all that, guys, it's time to drop this in. Very simple. As you see, it's just the reverse of the disassembly. So we'll be done with that in just a few minutes. So let's go ahead and get this sucker dropped into the bike. Go ahead and get a little bit more gunk cleaned out now that the shock's out of the way. Next thing you want to do is get a little bit of fresh waterproof grease on these pins, both above and below. You can go ahead and pack this with fresh grease as well. Looks like Pro Circuit's already done it. This is very lubricated. And so we'll go ahead and drop this sucker in. Get the lower bolt done. Have to lift the rear wheel and get the upper bolt in. Get the shock raised into the right position. And there she is. Upper nut, lower nut. So it may be difficult to see, but if you guys don't have a torque wrench, what I do before I take these apart, I didn't show you that, apologies, is I hit everything with a Sharpie. I run a Sharpie mark across the shank and onto the nut, so you have an alignment point as you retighten this where you know to stop when the two Sharpie marks line up with one another. These Sharpie marks also make a really great visual aid at the track. So since I'm putting in a new shock between motos, I can actually look at this and make sure that nothing moved. So I do the same thing to all the linkage and all the sprocket bolts, stem nut up above. It's just really handy to have a point of reference. You never know, might keep you safe, might save your day. After that, guys, just put everything back together. We're gonna go ahead and see if you guys notice what I'm intentionally doing wrong right now. You guys let me know in the comments below if you caught it. So first we'll take our connector, recouple that to the sensor in the air box, click like so, and we'll go ahead and get the air boot over the intake, which is impossible for you guys to see, apologies. And if you need a second set of hands, you can always install one of the 4 subframe bolts just to kind of help hold this thing up in the air so you can manipulate it. Once I get the thing pretty much held on its own, now I can go ahead and work the air boot back over the intake just to make sure it is absolutely seated on there. And as you can see, we are firmly seated, very good. Now we can tighten that 3mm back up. Now as I'm spinning all these subframe bolts in, I will also leave all of them loose. None of them will be tightened until the end. It keeps things a little bit more easy to move around, and it's especially helpful if you're having an issue getting the pipe back on for some reason. You can leave everything loose until the very end. Go through and tighten it all at once. You guys remember your little factory reusable zip tie? To make sure to put that back on to hold the sensor wire. Go ahead and put our exhaust back on. No clearance issues noted as I passed that new rear shock. I didn't hit it or anything. Just like the subframe, everything is going to be put on loosely for now, and then I'll go ahead and tighten everything at the same time. Start with the impact. As you can hear, I'm not giving it the berries, I'm just cinching things down. Impact, very handy, can speed up your life a little bit. And then of course go ahead and fall back by hand with your ratchet. Now you got to go ahead and get your tank strap weaseled back through this rubber flap. This thing keeps water out of your air box when you're washing your bike. Get that connected back up to the top of your tank. Reconnect your radiator shrouds, number plate, seat, like so. And that's it. You guys are dialed and ready to ride. So yeah, I'm really excited to give it a shakedown. Next stop, guys, we're gonna hit Skyline MX Park and Event Center in Boise, Idaho. We're gonna give this thing a little rundown. And before we hit the track, if you guys caught that I left this rag in the intake on purpose, asked you what I did wrong, you would be right. Of course, I pulled it out. You didn't win anything, but you are pretty awesome. All right, guys, I made it out to Skyline. Awesome turnout today, which is great to see. We've got the 250 shock installed. You guys did that with me at the shop. And right now I have it set up exactly the way Pro Circuit sent it to me. I'm not gonna change anything. and make sure it's not too loud for you guys. I'm not gonna change anything on the shock. I'm gonna leave it the way it is. Historically, these guys have been really, really close right out of the box. And my last shock, I made very little clicker changes to it, just a little bit of sag adjustments, the BFRC. And as you guys know, I absolutely love that shock. Today, I'm trying to feel this out to see where it's better, if it's better, and I think it will be. I think the BFRC tends to struggle in like successive square edge holes and chop, especially when the track gets rough. The bike has a hard time following the ground. So I'm hoping that I will find some happiness here. I'm sure that I will, so let's check it out. And then when we get back, we'll check the sag. We're gonna sort of break it in, even though it was a used shock, and just see what happens. So I'm gonna get my gear on, and we're gonna go out and putt around, see how it feels, and we'll start trying to push it from there if everything feels good and comfortable. So thanks for watching. All right, guys, it is time to go have some fun. I'm gonna head out to the main track. We're gonna putt around, and a huge shout out to my buddy Jonathan. He just came up and introduced himself to me. He is a YouTube subscriber. I appreciate that. I really do, man. That's awesome. It makes me feel good. He is just coming out to the motocross track for the first time, so that's really sweet. I hope you have a good day, buddy, and you can always lean on me if you need any help or info. So thank you for coming to visit me. That was really cool. Now, guys, if you're testing new suspension or new anything, wow, that feels really good, by the way. If you're testing something new, it could even be new knee braces. There's Jay right there. You want to take your time. It's super important to take your time. God forbid, you know, your new knee braces get hung up on your radiator shroud and you have a tip over, or what if my new shock had all the nitrogen come out of it when it was on the UPS truck, right? You never know. So feel this stuff out. You want to be able to ride the whole day, and especially every weekend, so very important. I usually find that if I have a slow start and I work up for the day too, I end up having a better ride anyway. So let's test this 250 shock out. Feel the difference immediately. I know I just did like 3 turns already, and I did not expect this. The shock follows the ground so well. I did not expect to feel a difference right away. The shock is following the ground better. The bike is doing less buckboarding back and forth. The track isn't beat up yet, but still, even when the bumps are small, or the track is a little bit wavy, normally the bike would be kind of getting pogoed forward a little bit more, so that was cool. Let's go do some more. Here's another good example. I have a pretty decent back problems in turn of or in regards to my lower discs. I've had some bulging injuries a few times, like most of you guys have. Construction never helped, but the shock right now is set up much softer in conjunction to the front end. So right now, when I jumped the big jump halfway and cased it, I kind of felt it in my back, and I always try to ride with pretty firmed up posture to protect myself. So that's a perfect example of taking your time, not jumping everything right away. You guys get the point. But right now I have the front end set up much stiffer to be paired with the BFRC. Much stiffer is just the way it ended up being with this new shock test. So it's a little out of balance because of that. I think the front end is pushing the rear down, plus, you know, the clickers just are where they are. We don't know where the sag is yet, so we'll check the sag later. That would be either raising or lowering the rear end. If I kept the settings up front the way they are, which I know I like, then
I would want to add a little bit of preload to remove some sag in the back, but we need to check the numbers to find out for sure. At any rate, this thing feels a lot more fluffy. It feels a lot more tractable. It feels a lot more, it just feels smoother. There's less stuff happening all at once in the back. So I can feel the circuits in this shock that I have now that I didn't have in the BFRC. So over a little chop or little bumps, the low speed compression, it feels really good. When I am casing stuff, not jumping stuff on purpose, I can feel the shock going through the stroke faster. So in the shop, we talked a little bit about how with the BFRC only having a low speed compression adjustment, that it's sort of a balance between bottoming out on jump faces, which would be a high-speed compression circuit, which I have now, or having it nice over little chops. So it's like a kind of a give and take with the BFRC. And so now I can feel the two circuits, the low speed, the little chop. It feels pretty good. Maybe I'll go in one, but we're gonna check the sag first. And then the bottoming out, or the high-speed compression circuit that I have now in really particular situations like jump faces and casing and landings. I can tell I need to go a little stiffer because it's going through the stroke pretty fast, but already it feels so much more like comfortable just in general going around the track. So I'm excited about this. We'll finish up a few more spins right now, feel it out a little bit more, and if I feel something else, I'll pull over and talk to you about it. Otherwise, we'll get back to the van, check the sag, get the mud off the bike, and then spin some clickers, come back and do it again. Shock feels so much better already. Oh yeah. Guys, I really like it. The bike is just following the ground really well. Normally I really struggle with my turns, A, because of skill, and B, because now I can tell I'm fighting the old rear shock a little bit. This is a very welcome addition to the RMZ. That was incredibly fun. So incredibly fun. This thing gets into ruts, not that I do, but this thing gets into ruts a lot better without fighting the bike. Normally it's got a lot more action in the chassis. It's getting bumped around more, and that tends to really screw me up when I'm trying to set up to go into a rut, coupled with my not so great skill set already, very medium if at best. But I want to make another point. Right now the bike is covered in mud. It's still a little wet out there, still a little fluffy, so we want to scrape all the mud off the bike before we do anything. In fact, I'm going to scrape the bike, go in a little bit on the high-speed compression like we talked about to alleviate some of that G out on jump faces and casing it, and then I'm only going to do the high-speed compression. That's it. One change at a time is very important. So all this stuff here, this can have a massive negative effect on what you're trying to do, or if it's a positive effect, then it just means you need to make an adjustment in the other direction. But generally speaking, you want your bike mud free pretty much all day, of course, and this will give us the best idea of what's actually happening. You know, you could stack 10 pounds of mud on your bike so easily. So we'll scrape this, and then we'll give it a little low speed compression click, and then like I said, I'll check the sag later. I'm not having any issues with balance where the bike feels stink bug or too far forward or too far back. Right now, I'm pretty happy with the way the bike is working front to back and in terms of rear shock spring tension. So we'll leave that alone. And then the high speed compression, let's see. So we got low comp, that's like the little bumps. Then we have low speed rebound, which is how fast the shock is coming back out. And then this is the high speed compression, which is already, let's see, 1, 2, we'll go 2. It's already in quite a bit further than the other two. And if this doesn't end up being it, and we check sag later and we find out that there's too much sag, then we can come back to out on this, adjust the sag and check it again. So this is why you take your time with this stuff, and this is why you only do one circuit at a time. You want to set it up, and for most people forget it after that, but at any rate, if you need to make clicker changes later and you have your balance dialed, then it's really easy to find the setting if you're at a different track, one that's outdoor and fast, or one that's really tight and compact where you might need a different setting. So overall, shocked to know that right away it just felt so much better, so much less fight front to rear. There's so much less like buckboarding going on, even when the track is smooth. So that's going to be a blessing when the track gets choppy. Let's go ride. But I'm still overpowering the rear. So we only made it one lap. Looks like they're gonna let the little guys go out. Must be 10 a.m. So just in that short lap, I can tell I'm still overpowering the rear. I'm gonna go ahead and check the sag. I don't want to make too many more clicker adjustments in. The high speed is already pretty well buried into the shock body. All right, so I'm kind of pumped, guys. Normally I have a sliding ruler to check my sag, but I opened my toolbox and completely forgot. I've probably had this for 2 years. I got a gift from my parents actually for Christmas. It's this Slacker tool, so I figured this would be really handy to try setting my sag myself. I've never used this bad boy. Hopefully I have a screwdriver to get some batteries into it. It's a little one. Anyways, this thing magnetizes to your swing arm, then it digitally takes your sag, so that's pretty cool. I'm gonna get it set up and try and get it on the bike. Dug a little deeper in the toolbox, and I even had a phone mount, and then I realized there was an app, so I can check this on my phone even, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna get myself familiarized with this. Apparently it works on street bikes, mountain bikes, dirt bikes, adventure bikes, so pretty cool tool. And you can even check your preload or sag on your forks. There's another attachment in here for that somewhere. Anyways, I'm gonna get this set up and we're gonna give this thing a shot and see how it works. Alright, so I think this is everything I need. I've got the clip for the hook and I've got the Slacker itself. This guy goes on your axle, magnetic. I think the only thing is that it can move, so I got to figure out how to get that thing to sit still. I guess if I put it right in the middle, I mean, we're measuring in millimeters, we want it to be as exact as possible. And I got this hook. I'm going to attach this to my fender. You want to try and find a spot that's duplicatable where you can kind of put it back later on and where it's not going to move around a lot. So this is a cool little clamp. It seems pretty secure up here. And then this hook goes up, attaches to that. Hold it for 1 second. Turns on. Okay, cool, it's zeroed. So let's check the free sag. You do that by just seeing what the bike weighs or how much it sags under its own weight. I'm trying to move it slowly. So 36 millimeters, 35 millimeters, that's basically perfect. You want it between 30 and 40. And if you can't hit the 30 and 40 number with the bike under its own weight, and then let's say 100 to 107, for example, with your weight on it, then you have the wrong spring. It could be too stiff or too soft, depending on how far out of those two checklist parameters you're outside of. Let's see if we can't set up the handlebar mount for the cell phone. That way I can see my race sag with my weight on it up on my bars. This is what I'm really excited about, to be honest. So this thing looks pretty cool. It's gonna hold our phone. That's nice right there. It's got like a little swing clasp. That's handy. So put it on here. Guy spins on there pretty easy. Then there's like a jam nut, little thumb dial on the bottom. That's cool. Get our phone in there. Nice. All right, so when you are setting your race sag, you want to make sure to have all your gear on. You're trying to get at full riding weight. That's the goal. Not going to put my gloves on or my goggles, but you do want to get as much of your heavy gear on as you can, like your riding gear, your helmet, your boots, all that stuff. My knee braces, obviously those are all on. So now we can kind of get started. So we're going to check out this app. It's pretty cool. It's called Virtual Remote. Let's see. Oh, you can reset it, auto zero. It's Bluetooth, so I got to figure out how to hook that up. All right, so I connected. I held the light button down. This thing did its Bluetooth thing, and the app found it on its own. I didn't have to find it in my phone Bluetooth menu. However, I got a discrepancy here. I got, oh, there we go. The Slacker SAG tool said 3. This said 0. I hit reset, and it went back to 0. So that's cool. I can just reset it really easy. Let's see what our sag is at. Take it off the stand slow. I don't want to have that thing slide off the magnet. And you want to get your full weight on the bike too, best you can. I'm going to use my stand, and I'm at 102, 103. All right, so this tool is amazing. That's probably one of the coolest things I've ever done to set sag. Give it a few bounces. I got as much of my weight on there as I can. Now we're at 104, 106. I'm lifting my right leg off my bike stand to get as much weight on the bike as I can. I'm between 104 and 106, so that tells me that the spring is the right spring rate, which obviously it should be. Pro Circuit did it. So I got, there you go, some free sag numbers. It was 34. I got race sag number 104 to 106. That's right where I like it. So this thing does not need any extra preload or removal of slack by adjusting the shock spring colors right now anyways. Damn, this Slacker's cool. I mean, so this thing's been sitting in my toolbox for at least 2 years. I guess the joke's on me. Good job, Slacker. So if I didn't mention it, you also want to try and put this hook in an area where it's working on the suspension's arc. Your wheel doesn't go straight up and down. It goes in and out on an arc based off, you know, this pivot point, and it's swinging in and out. So KTMs actually have a line on the fender that you can use, which is the optimal spot. But if you have a Japanese bike, you guys notice I didn't go straight up and down. I went a little bit inset and tried to work on the wheel's actual suspension arc. And maybe one of the coolest things about this, besides the app, which was amazing, is that I can just go ahead and leave that in the van. It's just ready for me when I need it. So that's really cool. Thanks, Mom and Dad. So as you guys can see, Pro Circuit nailed my spring rate perfectly. I'm not shocked by that at all. It's what they do. That is their profession. They also gave me this little sticker, told me where the clickers were at to start, the spring rate, the date it was serviced, everything. They said the race sag was between 102 and 105. That was pretty much spot on. They said the static sag, or sag when the bike's under its own weight, was 30 to 40. Again, that was spot on, right in the middle. So I just went in 2 clicks on the low speed compression. We already went 2 in on the high speed compression. The sag was perfect. And so if I'm going the wrong way or things aren't improving, I can jump into some of the other settings and we can put things back where they were. Tuning suspension takes a while, but when you get it, it's like magic and it's free. So just take your time, one circuit at a time.
Guys, hands down, if you own a 2018 or newer RMZ 450, this is a very awesome, very worthy mod. I love it. I finished out the day with very few clicker adjustments and got the shock working incredible. Earlier in the day, it wasn't quite in unison with the front end, which is totally to be expected in a situation like this. And as you guys saw in the video, I make clicker changes very slowly and one circuit at a time. Not only is that the best way to figure out what change actually made the difference in your writing, but it also shows you just how close these guys are with their baseline setting. It's almost scary. So in the end, on the high-speed compression circuit, my settings ended up being too stiffer or slower than the original baseline. Once I got the bike to feel like it stopped G'ing out or sacking out in fast shaft speed situations, I went ahead and stopped and moved on to the low-speed compression circuit. And with the low-speed compression, I ended up just 3 clicks slower or firmer. Between these two circuits and doing them one by one, it absolutely neutralized any of the sogginess or sacking out or softness I was feeling in the back. At the beginning of the day, I felt like the forks were actually adding to the issue. They were a little bit stiffer than the shock, and so when they hit obstacles, a lot of that gets transferred back and it makes the shock feel even mushier. There was a point at which I actually got to 4 clicks in or slower or firmer on the low speed compression, and I actually ended up going back out to 3. 4 clicks in was a little too stiff, a little too slow. So you guys can see just how close they were with the baseline setting. And if you guys have never had your suspension done by a professional race shop, I highly recommend it. You get a lot of return out of very few clicker adjustments, meaning one adjustment makes a huge change. But as for both the high speed and low speed rebound circuits, I have not touched them yet. I got the bike feeling really good, and it's also very hard to get a shock perfectly dialed in all in one day. So as time moves on, I'll probably click and tweak and do a few more things on those circuits, or maybe I'll end up at a different track that might require it. And it's really cool to know this shock will probably get even better than it already is. I had a great time using it. But my final thoughts on the day, yes. Guys, this is awesome. I can feel the difference almost immediately, like within my first 100 feet on the track. And that is against what I thought was a perfectly fixed BFRC, which I really enjoy and have about 100 collective hours of riding on. And before today, I didn't even have any complaints about the old BFRC. I really liked it, especially compared to the stock BFRC setup. However, now I know I've been missing out the whole time, so to speak, not having this 250 shock. The bike gets into ruts and dives into turns with so much more ease than it used to. If the front end encounters a little bit of chop on its way into a turn or a rut, a lot of that doesn't transfer back to the rear of the bike like it used to, where the shock would then transfer back to the front. And so there was a lot more buckboarding, I guess you could say, when the rear shock would have energy transferred to it. And once that happens, I would pretty much blow most of my turns, half of that skill, but I can definitely tell that the shock made a massive change there for me. And some time ago, Motocross Action magazine even made a comment about the BFRC. They wrote, "The BFRC doesn't like bumps," and now that totally makes sense, which is funny, a shock that doesn't like bumps, right? However, when the track is smooth, the BFRC is just awesome. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't obsolete the shock, that doesn't mean it's a bad unit, and certainly do not let it deter you from buying one of these amazing 450s. It's still a really great shock, and I'm also really glad there's also a drop-in option if you get to the point where your skill permits you move up to a different shock. I feel like in some ways this will actually unlock some of my own potential, and it would be a lot like getting on a bike that's just a better bike to begin with. Say a KTM right out of the box is a little bit better setup for most people than this bike. KTM is a lot smoother, the chassis is more compliant, these are very rigid and stiff, which actually is part of the reason the BFRC and the front end and this frame kind of create a struggle to begin with. So I guess I'd equate it to that, and hopefully that makes sense. So guys, if you want one of these RMZ250 shocks, you can get them from quite literally any of your favorite OEM suppliers. In my case, I actually found it on Facebook in some of the Facebook Suzuki groups or marketplace, and that actually made it about half the cost. It even came with upgraded colors from the plastic to the metal, which was nice, and it even had a blue anodized and oversized oil reservoir, and that will help keep the shock cooler. So I got a better deal, and it already had a few extra gadgets on it. And so wrapping up, I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. The shock has been on the shelf for about 6 weeks. We finally got around to doing it. Now, if you'd like to get caught up with the rest of the Mortal Man's RMZ build series, we've tested exhaust, different suspension, stock against mod, engine mounts, all kind of stuff. You guys can check out this playlist right here to get caught up to speed. And until next time, I sincerely hope you enjoyed. Shred safe, and I'll talk to you soon.